15 months after she disappeared, the billionaire cowboy received a letter. Sir, you were named. Daniel Hayes was a man who lived life on his own terms. He wasn't born into wealth, but he had built his fortune from scratch. With grit, determination, and a sharp mind for business, Daniel had transformed a small cattle ranch into a sprawling empire that stretched across Texas and beyond. People in the city knew him as a billionaire, a shrewd investor, and a man of influence, but on the ranch he was something different. There he was just Daniel, a man who understood the land, the animals, and the hard work it took to make something last. His days began before sunrise, often with the smell of hay, fresh soil, and the sound of cattle moving in the fields. He found comfort in the rhythm of farm life, the quiet moments where no one watched or judged him. Despite his busy life, Daniel was not a lonely man by choice. He had friends and business partners, people he trusted, but he valued simplicity. He preferred worn boots over shiny shoes and old hats over anything expensive. Even in the midst of board meetings, he would think about the wide-open fields, the horizon, and the freedom that life on the ranch gave him. The ranch was more than just land. It was home, a place where he felt grounded and at peace. Yet despite all the work, wealth, and the recognition, there was a part of his life that was quietly empty, a part that only the right person could fill. Clara Bennett was that person, though neither of them realized it at first. Clara was young, smart, and full of life. She had a gentle spirit, an intelligent mind, and a curiosity about the world that was impossible to ignore. She had joined Daniel's ranch as a veterinarian assistant, helping care for the animals. It was her love for animals and her dedication to their care that caught Daniel's attention first. She treated every creature with patience, understanding, and kindness. Unlike some people who were intimidated by Daniel's wealth and influence, Clara treated him as an equal, someone who deserved respect rather than reverence. It was refreshing for him, and over time it became more than refreshing. It became comforting. Their friendship grew slowly. It was never dramatic or rushed. They shared quiet moments in the barn, discussing the health of the animals, the weather, or small details of life on the ranch. Daniel admired Clara's intelligence and her ability to see the good in everything. Clara admired Daniel's strength and his steady, calm nature. There was trust, respect, and an unspoken bond that formed over shared sunrises, late-night work, and long rides across the fields. It was subtle, but the connection was deep, built not on words alone, but on shared experiences and mutual understanding. One day, Clara confided in Daniel about her dreams beyond the ranch. She wanted to study advanced veterinary medicine, travel, and one day run her own animal sanctuary. Daniel listened, supporting her dreams quietly. He offered advice, guidance, and sometimes just a listening ear. In return, Clara trusted him with her fears, her hopes, and her small, unspoken vulnerabilities. Life went on, day after day, with both of them busy in their respective worlds, yet always aware of the other's presence. It was a routine that was comfortable, safe, and yet secretly comforting in a way neither had admitted out loud. Then, one evening, everything changed. Clara didn't return home. At first, Daniel assumed she had simply stayed late at the clinic, helping an animal in need. But when night fell and there was no sign of her, a sense of unease began to creep in. He tried calling, sending messages, and asking her colleagues, but no one had seen her after that day. The worry settled in his chest like a heavy stone. Days passed, then weeks, and Daniel's unease grew into concern. Something felt wrong, though he could not pinpoint what it was. He thought perhaps she had left town, maybe to pursue one of her dreams. That thought offered a little comfort, but only a little. Deep down, he felt that Clara would have told him if she were leaving. She trusted him. She would have told him. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel began to act. He hired private investigators, people who could search for Clara quietly without attracting media attention. He made discreet calls, asked questions, and even went to the local authorities, though he preferred not to involve them too publicly. He knew that involving law enforcement would make the case public, and he wanted to respect Clara's privacy. He tried to piece together her last known movements, talked to her friends, colleagues, and family, but every lead seemed to go nowhere. It was as if she had vanished from the earth entirely. The mystery consumed him. He replayed the last day he saw her in his mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for something he might have missed. But the more he searched, the more frustrating it became. Months passed. The season changed. Winter arrived, followed by spring. Life on the ranch went on, but for Daniel, time had slowed in a strange way. Every sunrise reminded him that Clara was still missing. Every empty room echoed her absence. He tried to focus on work, to immerse himself in his business ventures, but nothing could fill the empty space her disappearance left behind. Employees noticed a change in him. He was quieter, less patient, more introspective. Friends who used to visit often noticed that Daniel rarely left the ranch anymore. He had built walls around himself, not to shut people out, but to guard the memory of Clara and the hope, however small, that she might return. At night, when he rode alone through the fields, the wind in his face felt like a reminder of her absence. It was in the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of cattle, and the stillness of the barn that he felt her most. Daniel also began to reflect on the nature of trust and responsibility. Clara had trusted him without question, shared her dreams and vulnerabilities, and now he was left with questions and doubts. He wondered if there was something he should have done differently, something he could have noticed, or some clue he had overlooked. Yet he also realized that some things were beyond anyone's control. Life could be unpredictable, fragile, and at times unfair. But Daniel was determined not to let despair consume him. He would continue to search, quietly and persistently. He would honor the trust Clara had placed in him, even if he did not yet know how. Then one ordinary morning, as he went through the daily mail, Daniel's life shifted again. Amidst the bills, invoices, and routine letters, one envelope stood out. It was plain, unmarked, and lacked any return address. Something about it drew him in, an intuition he could not explain. With cautious hands, he opened it. Inside was a simple message, typed and concise, yet heavy with meaning. It read, "Sir, you were named." There were no other words on the page, no explanation, only the message that would ignite a chain of events Daniel could never have anticipated. For a moment, he simply stared at the letter, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. The calm, measured life he had maintained for months seemed to crack in that moment. The letter was both a shock and a lifeline, a sudden reminder that Clara's presence in his life, though absent, had not completely disappeared. Someone had named him for a responsibility, a role, a trust that only he could fulfill. And just like that, the mystery of Clara's disappearance collided with a new reality, one that demanded his attention, courage, and heart. Daniel's mind raced with questions. Why had Clara named him? What had happened during her absence? What did this responsibility entail? He felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of honor. Though he did not fully understand it, he knew one thing. The bond he shared with Clara had not ended with her disappearance. It had evolved into something more profound, something that required action. And for the first time in months, Daniel felt a spark of purpose, a reason to step out of the solitude he had surrounded himself with. This letter, brief as it was, became the turning point in a journey that would test his strength, character, and capacity for care. With determination, Daniel prepared to follow the instructions in the letter. He would uncover the truth, face the unknown, and honor the trust placed in him. He did not yet know what lay ahead, but he was ready to step into it. After 15 months of uncertainty, worry, and quiet reflection, Daniel Hayes was about to enter a chapter of his life that would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. Ways that would reveal the depth of his compassion, his courage, and the quiet strength that had always defined him. Daniel held the letter in his hands, staring at the words that seemed simple yet carried an invisible weight. "Sir, you were named." That was all it said, but for Daniel, it felt like a door opening to a mystery he had been avoiding for 15 months. He could feel his pulse quicken, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and something he could not yet name. Clara's disappearance had left a hole in his life, and this letter was the first sign that she had not left him behind completely. She had trusted him even after she vanished, and now he had to understand why. He read and reread the letter. The paper was thin, the print crisp, and the tone formal, but the words carried a quiet urgency. There were no names besides his, no explanations, and no immediate instructions beyond a suggestion to contact a law firm in Denver. Daniel's first instinct was to question the authenticity of the letter. Could it be a mistake, a prank, a scam? He knew how easily someone could manipulate a person with just a few words, but something deep inside him told him that this was real. Clara had always been careful, thoughtful, and deliberate. If she had entrusted him with something important, it would not be a lie or a trap. After a long moment of hesitation, he dialed the number provided. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, explaining that the documents he had been named in were genuine and legally binding. The law firm could not discuss details over the phone due to confidentiality. Daniel had expected some explanation, but all he received was confirmation that Clara had acted through proper legal channels, leaving him with only one choice: to travel to Denver and meet with the attorneys in person. The decision weighed on him. He had not left the ranch in months, focusing instead on managing his business and coping with Clara's absence. Yet now, he felt a pull he could not resist. Something about Clara's trust, the responsibility she had left in his hands, and the unknown reality of what awaited in Denver gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. With a deep breath, he made arrangements for the trip. The private jets, the expensive cars, and the luxury hotels were part of his usual life, but this journey was different. It was personal, private, and filled with uncertainty. The flight to Denver gave him hours to think. He replayed the last moments he had shared with Clara, remembering her smile, the way she laughed when an animal behaved unexpectedly, and the quiet moments in the barn where they had shared their thoughts and dreams. The memories were bittersweet, a mixture of joy and pain, of connection and absence. Daniel realized how much he had missed her presence, not just in a casual sense, but in the way her presence had shaped his days and thoughts. He had always respected her independence, her ability to make decisions for herself, and now she had made a decision that affected him profoundly without speaking to him directly. When he arrived in Denver, the city felt different from the calm and open spaces of his ranch. The streets were busy, the air filled with sounds of traffic, and the energy of the city pulsed around him. He navigated through the bustling streets, feeling slightly out of place but focused. He arrived at the law firm's office, a sleek building that contrasted sharply with the quiet, earthy simplicity of his ranch. The receptionist greeted him professionally, and soon he was escorted into a small office where the attorney awaited. The attorney, a woman named Margaret Ellis, was polite, efficient, and precise. She welcomed Daniel and offered him a seat. Her demeanor was calm but serious, and Daniel felt immediately that he was in the presence of someone who handled important matters regularly. She did not waste time with small talk, instead explaining the purpose of the meeting. Clara Bennett had prepared legal documents months before her disappearance. In these documents, she had named Daniel Hayes as the legal guardian of a child in the event that she could not care for the child herself. Daniel listened carefully, the words sinking in slowly. He felt a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and curiosity. Clara had never mentioned a child to him. She had shared parts of her life, her dreams, and her fears, but this had never come up. The realization made him sit straighter, his mind racing with questions. Why had she named him? Why had she not told him about the child? What circumstances had led her to make such a decision without speaking to him directly? Margaret handed him a folder containing official documents. Daniel examined them carefully. The papers were formal, stamped with signatures, medical details, and legal language he did not fully understand. But one thing was clear. Clara had taken deliberate steps to ensure that he would be the person to care for the child if she could not. She had trusted him above anyone else, including her family. She had made sure that everything was prepared legally so that he would not have to struggle with the process. As Daniel went through the documents, he learned more details that shocked him. Clara had given birth quietly without announcing it publicly. The child, a boy named Samuel, was 14 months old. Clara had faced health challenges, some of them serious, and had sought specialized medical treatment far from the ranch. She had acted alone, quietly, ensuring her child's well-being while keeping her struggles private. The documents included medical reports, guardianship instructions, and personal letters. One letter, written in Clara's own words, stood out. In it, Clara explained her reasoning. If I cannot return, Daniel Hayes is the only man I trust to raise my child with honor. He understands responsibility, integrity, and care. He will provide the guidance, stability, and love my child needs. The words struck Daniel deeply. Her trust in him was profound, more than he had realized. She had faced difficulties, made difficult choices, and even in her absence, she had ensured that he would be involved in the life of her child. Daniel felt a swell of emotion he could not easily describe. There was sadness for what Clara had endured, admiration for her courage and thoughtfulness, and a deep sense of responsibility for the role she had entrusted to him. He realized that this was not just a legal matter. It was a moral and emotional duty, one that required his full attention, commitment, and care. The weight of the responsibility was heavy, but it was also meaningful in a way that touched him deeply. Margaret Ellis explained that the child was currently in temporary care under state supervision. The authorities had been following Clara's instructions, ensuring that the child was safe and well cared for. Daniel would need to complete certain legal procedures to become the official guardian, but the path was clear. Everything had been prepared meticulously by Clara. She had thought of every detail from medical care to daily routines to ensure a smooth transition if he accepted the responsibility. Daniel asked many questions. He wanted to know about Samuel's health, his habits, and what the child had experienced in the past months. Margaret answered with as much detail as she could, respecting confidentiality where necessary. Daniel listened intently, absorbing every piece of information. He realized that raising a child was nothing like managing a business or a ranch. It required patience, empathy, and constant attention. It was a challenge unlike any he had faced, but he felt ready to meet it. Clara's trust had given him a sense of purpose and a guide for how he should proceed. The meeting lasted for hours. Daniel reviewed the documents, asked questions, and made careful notes. By the time he left the law firm, he felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The responsibility ahead was immense, but he could not ignore it. Clara had chosen him, and he would honor that choice. As he walked through the streets of Denver, he thought about what awaited him back home on the ranch. A child, a new life, and the opportunity to care for someone in the way Clara had envisioned. On the flight back to Texas, Daniel reflected on the events of the past few days. The letter, the meeting, and the revelations about Clara's life had opened a door to a future he had never imagined. He thought about the kind of person he wanted to be for Samuel, about the lessons he wanted to teach him, and the love he could give. He also thought about Clara, the strength and foresight she had shown, and how her trust in him was a testament to the bond they had shared. It was not just a connection to a child, but a continuation of the relationship he had with Clara, a way to honor her life and her choices. Returning to the ranch, Daniel prepared for a life that would be transformed. The routines of ranch work would remain, but they would now include care, attention, and love for a child who depended on him. The quiet ranch, once filled with absence, would now have the laughter, cries, and curiosity of a young boy. Daniel's days would be full of new challenges, small joys, and moments that required patience and understanding. The responsibility was real, the trust profound, and the opportunity to create a meaningful life undeniable. Daniel knew that accepting this role was more than legal, it was personal. It was a chance to honor Clara's trust, to provide a loving home, and to shape a life in a way that reflected the values he held dear. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with learning, adjustments, and moments of doubt, but it was also a journey filled with hope, purpose, and connection. The letter that began with "Sir, you were named," had set in motion a path that would change him, challenge him, and ultimately define a new chapter of his life. As the sun set over the ranch, Daniel stood at the edge of the field, thinking about the boy who was waiting for him, about the woman who had entrusted him, and about the life that was about to begin. He felt a sense of calm determination, a quiet courage, and an unshakable commitment to do what was right. Clara had left him a gift, a responsibility, and a chance to continue a bond that went beyond words. And Daniel Hayes, the billionaire cowboy who had faced many challenges in life, now faced the most meaningful one of all, the opportunity to care for, guide, and love a child who needed him. Daniel Hayes returned to Texas with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The ranch looked the same as it always had, the sun rising over the open fields, the soft hum of cattle in the distance, and the wind brushing across the grass. But now it carried a new meaning. The ranch, once quiet and peaceful in its solitude, would soon become a home filled with life and responsibility. He knew that the child, Samuel, was waiting for him, and with every passing mile, Daniel felt the weight of what lay ahead. He had spent months alone with thoughts of Clara, replaying memories and reflecting on her choices, but now he was about to step into the reality she had prepared for him. When he arrived at the temporary care facility where Samuel was staying, Daniel was met by a social worker named Rachel. She was professional yet warm, understanding that this transition could be both overwhelming and emotional. She led him to a small, cheerful room where a boy, barely 14 months old, played with soft toys on the floor. The child looked up and smiled, reaching out his tiny hands toward Daniel. It was a simple moment, but for Daniel it was profound. The smile, the innocence, and the trust reflected in that moment were overwhelming. He realized immediately that Clara had chosen well. The bond between a guardian and a child was invisible at first, but it could be felt deeply, and he felt it instantly. Holding Samuel for the first time, Daniel felt an unexpected surge of emotion. The boy was small and fragile, yet there was a strength in his gaze, a curiosity that seemed far beyond his age. Daniel had cared for many things in his life: land, cattle, businesses, and investments. But none of these required the same kind of attention, love, and patience that a child did. He held Samuel gently, rocking him slightly, feeling the rhythm of his tiny heartbeat and the trust in his small hands gripping his fingers. In that instant, Daniel understood the enormity of the responsibility Clara had left in his hands. It was a responsibility not of wealth or power, but of care, guidance, and love. Over the following days, Daniel began learning the routines of child care. He discovered the simple yet profound demands of raising a child: feeding, bathing, reading, playing, and comforting. Every small task carried a weight of importance, every choice affecting the life of Samuel in subtle ways. Daniel realized that raising a child was unlike running a business. It required patience beyond calculation, attention beyond observation, and a love that was unconditional and unwavering. He made mistakes, of course. He forgot nap times, misread cries, and sometimes felt overwhelmed by the sheer responsibility. But each challenge taught him something new, deepening his understanding of the child and his own capacity to care. Daniel also took time to reflect on Clara's life in those months before her disappearance. He learned more about her journey through the documents she had prepared and the careful instructions she had left behind. Clara had faced medical challenges that were serious and required her to leave town quietly. She had sought specialized treatment that could not be discussed publicly, and she had done so alone, with no one knowing where she was or why she had gone. Daniel felt a mixture of sadness and admiration. Clara had been brave, thoughtful, and selfless. She had faced difficulties without complaint, and had ensured that Samuel would be protected and cared for, even if she could not return. The letters Clara had written to accompany the legal documents offered insight into her thinking and her heart. She had written about her hopes for Samuel, her desire for him to grow up in a safe, loving, and structured environment. She had chosen Daniel not because of his wealth or power, but because of his character, his sense of responsibility, his integrity, and the quiet strength he carried. Reading her words, Daniel felt a profound connection to her, a bond that transcended absence and time. She had trusted him in a way that few people ever could, and that trust now guided his actions. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Samuel developed a routine. Mornings began with gentle play, feeding, and walks around the ranch. Afternoons were filled with lessons, games, and storytelling. Evenings brought quiet moments by the fireplace, where Daniel read to Samuel from picture books, sang lullabies, and watched him drift into sleep. Each moment, however ordinary it might have seemed, carried meaning. Daniel realized that the small actions, the patience, the attentiveness, the steady presence, were building the foundation of Samuel's world. Daniel also began to notice the subtle ways Samuel reminded him of Clara. The boy's laughter, curiosity, and determination reflected the qualities he had admired in her. Every glance, every expression, carried echoes of her personality. It was a reminder that Clara's presence was not gone entirely. It lived on in her child. Daniel found himself speaking to Samuel about Clara in gentle ways, sharing stories of her kindness, intelligence, and courage. He wanted Samuel to grow up knowing not just who his mother had been, but also the values she had cherished and the love she had given. Managing the ranch alongside child care was not easy. Daniel had always been disciplined and organized, but the presence of a child required adjustments he had never anticipated. Meetings were scheduled around nap times, field inspections included play breaks, and business decisions were sometimes postponed to attend to Samuel's needs. The ranch workers, initially curious and cautious, began to adjust as well. They noticed a change in Daniel, a warmth and attentiveness that had not been present before. His leadership had always been strong, but now it was tempered with empathy, patience, and understanding. As he settled into his new life, Daniel also thought about the future. He wanted to honor Clara's memory and ensure that Samuel had every opportunity to grow up happy, healthy, and loved. He considered establishing a small foundation in her name to help families facing medical challenges, reflecting the compassion and foresight she had shown. He wanted her legacy to continue, not just through Samuel, but through the lives she had touched and the values she had embodied. Every decision he made carried that awareness, guiding him in ways he had never imagined. The first few months were filled with adjustments, learning, and quiet victories. Samuel began to respond to routines, forming bonds not just with Daniel but with the ranch animals and workers as well. Daniel found joy in simple moments. The first time Samuel fed a calf, the first time he walked without assistance, the first time he laughed at a story Daniel told. Each milestone, each small achievement, brought satisfaction and a sense of purpose that no business deal or financial success could replicate. Daniel also discovered a new side of himself. He had always valued discipline, hard work, and independence, but raising Samuel required flexibility, patience, and openness. He learned to adapt, to understand needs that were not articulated in words, and to respond with care rather than instruction. He realized that leadership in the ranch or in business was different from leadership in life. It required gentleness, empathy, and consistency. Samuel was teaching him as much as he was teaching Samuel, and in that exchange, Daniel found a new sense of fulfillment. One evening, as Daniel sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Samuel in his lap, he reflected on how far life had changed in just a few months. The quiet loneliness that had filled the ranch for 15 months was gone, replaced by laughter, curiosity, and love. The responsibilities he had once feared were now opportunities to grow, to connect, and to honor Clara's trust. He thought about the letter that had started this journey, those simple words that had seemed so mysterious at first, and he realized how profoundly they had changed his life. Daniel knew that challenges would continue. Raising a child was a lifelong responsibility, filled with joys and difficulties alike. There would be days of exhaustion, moments of doubt, and unexpected surprises. But he also knew that he was not alone in this journey. He had Samuel, the memory of Clara, the support of his ranch workers, and his own resilience. Together, they would navigate the path ahead, building a life grounded in love, trust, and care. The story of Clara, Samuel, and Daniel was unfolding in real time, each day bringing new experiences, lessons, and connections. Daniel had been named not just as a guardian, but as a keeper of trust, a protector of life, and a continuation of a bond that transcended absence. It was a role he had not anticipated, but one he embraced fully. In caring for Samuel, Daniel discovered a deeper understanding of responsibility, compassion, and the quiet power of love that shapes a life. Through it all, Daniel reflected on Clara's foresight, courage, and thoughtfulness. She had planned carefully, acted bravely, and entrusted him with a responsibility that was both challenging and rewarding. Her presence was not gone. It lived in Samuel, in the choices she had made, and in the trust she had placed in him. Daniel felt a profound sense of gratitude for that trust and a deep commitment to honor it every single day. As Part 3 comes to a close, Daniel's life has transformed completely. The quiet billionaire cowboy is now a father, a guardian, and a man guided by love and trust. Samuel's laughter fills the ranch, replacing the silence of months past. The legacy of Clara Bennett continues, not just in memory, but in life, shaping Daniel's days, his heart, and the future of the child she loved so dearly. Daniel Hayes is no longer just a man of wealth and power. He is a man of care, responsibility, and a heart open to the unexpected joys and challenges of life. Daniel Hayes woke to the soft morning light streaming through the windows of the ranch house. The house that had once felt quiet and empty was now alive with the gentle sounds of Samuel stirring in his crib. Daniel moved carefully, trying not to wake him, but Samuel's soft giggle soon filled the room, a reminder of the joy and responsibility that now defined his life. 15 months ago, Daniel's world had been orderly, controlled, and solitary. Now, it was full of unpredictability, laughter, and tiny hands that reached for him at all hours. The first weeks after bringing Samuel home were filled with learning, adjustment, and small triumphs. Daniel discovered that even the most routine tasks could be challenging with a child. Feeding, bathing, and changing diapers required patience, attention, and flexibility he had never needed in his work or business life. Yet despite the challenges, Daniel found a new kind of satisfaction. Every smile from Samuel, every milestone, every small discovery was a reward that no financial success could ever match. Daniel began to see life differently. It was no longer just about achievement or control. It was about care, love, and presence. The ranch itself also began to transform. The workers who had always respected Daniel for his leadership now saw a different side of him. He spoke more softly, smiled more often, and took time to listen in ways he had not before. Samuel's curiosity led them to explore the barn, the fields, and even the small creek near the ranch. Daniel watched as his son interacted with the animals, pointing at horses, stroking calves, and laughing at the soft bleats of lambs. Each new experience reminded Daniel of Clara and the trust she had placed in him. He realized that Samuel was not just a child. He was a living connection to the woman who had meant so much to him, a bond that gave him purpose and direction. Daniel also faced the realities of being a single caregiver. Nights were long, filled with rocking, feeding, and comforting Samuel through teething pains or bad dreams. Mornings required early wake-ups, preparing for the day while making sure the child's needs were met. Daniel learned quickly that raising a child demanded energy, patience, and attention beyond what he had imagined. Yet with each passing day, he became more confident, more capable, and more in tune with Samuel's rhythms. The challenges were real, but so were the rewards. He realized that life with Samuel, though unpredictable, was also deeply fulfilling. Through it all, Daniel reflected on Clara's choices and foresight. She had left behind not just a child, but a blueprint for care, guidance, and stability. Her letters, her legal documents, and her careful planning had ensured that Samuel's transition into his new home would be as smooth as possible. Daniel often read her words aloud to Samuel, sharing stories of his mother's kindness, intelligence, and bravery. He wanted Samuel to know who she had been, not as a figure in memory, but as a presence that guided their daily lives. Daniel felt honored to carry her legacy forward, to be the guardian she had trusted him to be, and to create a life for Samuel filled with love and security. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel began to notice Samuel's personality emerging. The boy was curious, intelligent, and energetic, always exploring the ranch and asking questions in his own way. Daniel encouraged this curiosity, answering Samuel's questions, guiding him gently, and creating opportunities for learning. Together, they explored the pastures, counted the animals, and learned about the land that had been part of Daniel's life for decades. Daniel realized that this shared learning was more than just practical knowledge. It was a way to connect, to build trust, and to create memories that would last a lifetime. The social connections in Daniel's life also began to evolve. Friends and family who had noticed his solitude reached out, offering support, advice, and companionship. Daniel welcomed these connections cautiously at first, wary of interference, but he soon realized that they could provide valuable support, encouragement, and guidance. The ranch workers, too, became more involved, helping with both Samuel and the daily routines of ranch life. Daniel learned to accept help, realizing that care for a child was a shared responsibility, and that collaboration could strengthen both the child's upbringing and his own capacity to provide love and guidance. Daniel also found himself reflecting on his own growth. The challenges of fatherhood had forced him to slow down, to notice details he had previously overlooked, and to embrace patience in ways he had never imagined. He discovered that leadership was not just about making decisions, but about listening, observing, and responding with empathy. He found joy in the small victories, a first step, a new word, a shared laugh, and realized that these moments were more meaningful than any business success he had ever achieved. Life had become richer, deeper, and more fulfilling, all because of the child who now depended on him. One afternoon, Daniel decided to begin a small project in Clara's memory. He established a foundation aimed at helping children and single parents facing medical challenges, inspired by the courage and foresight Clara had shown. The foundation provided support for families, access to medical care, and educational resources. Daniel involved Samuel in small ways, telling him that his mother had wanted to help others and that together they could continue her work. This act of service became another way to honor Clara's legacy and teach Samuel about kindness, responsibility, and the power of compassion. As time passed, Daniel noticed changes in himself that he had not expected. He became more emotionally aware, more connected to the rhythms of life, and more invested in relationships beyond work. Samuel's presence had reshaped his priorities, teaching him that wealth, power, and control were not the only measures of success. Love, care, and commitment now defined his daily life. He felt a deeper sense of fulfillment, understanding that the bonds he built with Samuel, the workers, and the broader community were more important than any business deal or material accomplishment. Daniel also encountered moments of reflection and nostalgia. There were days when he would sit quietly, thinking about Clara, remembering her laughter, her intelligence, and the trust she had placed in him. He felt gratitude for the time they had shared, for the lessons she had unknowingly taught him, and for the gift of Samuel. He understood that her presence in his life was not limited to memory. It lived on in Samuel's laughter, curiosity, and character. These reflections strengthened his resolve to honor her trust, care for Samuel, and create a home filled with love, guidance, and opportunity. Over the months, Daniel and Samuel's bond deepened. Samuel began to recognize routines, anticipate activities, and communicate more clearly with gestures and words. Daniel responded with encouragement, patience, and understanding, nurturing both confidence and trust. Their days became a rhythm of learning, playing, and growing together. Daniel discovered that the joy of watching Samuel learn and explore was unlike any other joy he had experienced. Every discovery, every laugh, every shared moment strengthened the connection between father and child, creating a sense of family that had once seemed impossible. The community around the ranch also noticed the changes. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues saw Daniel as not only a successful businessman, but also a devoted guardian. He became more approachable, more empathetic, and more involved in local events, often bringing Samuel along to participate in community activities. Daniel realized that raising Samuel was also about teaching values, building connections, and creating a supportive environment that extended beyond the ranch. The lessons of kindness, responsibility, and compassion became central to both their lives, shaping the future in subtle but meaningful ways. As Samuel grew, Daniel made sure to celebrate milestones and achievements, large and small. Birthdays, first steps, first words, and first discoveries were all moments to cherish and honor. Daniel documented these moments with photographs, journals, and letters to Samuel, creating a record of love, growth, and shared experiences. These records became a bridge to Clara, a way to keep her memory alive and to show Samuel the thoughtfulness, courage, and love of the mother he never got to know fully. Evenings at the ranch became a special time. Daniel and Samuel would sit together by the fireplace, reading stories, talking about the day, and sharing quiet moments of connection. The sounds of the ranch, the wind in the trees, the distant calls of animals, and the gentle creaking of the old wooden floors provided a soothing backdrop to their evenings. Daniel cherished these moments, understanding that the simple, quiet rhythms of life were where true meaning and connection were found. Through it all, Daniel never forgot the letter that had started this journey. "Sir, you were named." Those simple words had changed his life, introducing him to a responsibility that was challenging, rewarding, and transformative. They had connected him to Clara, to Samuel, and to a life he had never imagined. The journey had been filled with uncertainty, learning, and growth, but it had also brought profound joy, love, and purpose. Daniel Hayes had begun as a man defined by his wealth, power, and independence. 15 months after Clara's disappearance, he had become a father, a guardian, and a man guided by responsibility and love. Samuel's laughter filled the ranch, transforming silence into life and solitude into connection. Clara's legacy lived on, not just in memory, but in action, shaping the life of the child she loved and the man she trusted. As Daniel watched Samuel explore the fields, chase butterflies, and laugh at the simple wonders of the world, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The past months of uncertainty, worry, and reflection had led him to this moment of clarity and purpose. He understood that life was unpredictable, sometimes difficult and often full of surprises, but it was also beautiful, rewarding, and deeply meaningful. Daniel smiled as Samuel ran toward him, tiny arms outstretched. He scooped the boy into his arms, holding him close, feeling the warmth, trust, and love between them. In that moment, Daniel knew that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with adventure, learning, and connection. Together, they would navigate life, honor Clara's memory, and build a future filled with love, laughter, and hope. The ranch, the child, and the memories of Clara Bennett had transformed Daniel Hayes completely. He was no longer just a billionaire cowboy. He was a father, a guardian, and a man who had discovered the true meaning of responsibility, trust, and love. And in the quiet beauty of the Texas fields, surrounded by animals, nature, and the sounds of Samuel's laughter, Daniel felt at peace, ready to embrace the life that had been entrusted to him.